Well, while we continue to keep our eyes on what's playing out in Borno State and in other areas affected by flood, we turn our attention to yet another big issue, and that is petrol. Oh, yes. Well, petrol is a core ingredient in every facet of our lives. Yes, you may not, visibly put it, but it is there. The smell of petrol is evident, either at transportation, housing, and, well, the basic one, food, is what we turn our attention to this morning, how the recent hike in the price of petrol is affecting food production country. It was not as good before, but wonder what it is now with petrol prices at 900, 1,000 naira plus. On the program this morning, we're joined by an agripreneur, a dairy farmer, Aminu Murtala Yako, to speak to us about how the sector is doing. You're welcome to the Morning Brief, Mr. Murtala Yako.
Thank you so much for having me.
I know you can say a thing or two about the effect of flood on food production in Adamawa State, in Kaduna, how flooding has affected farmlands, has reduced yield and all of that. So when you see what is playing out in Maiduguri, do you also have an experience as to how flooding is affecting food production before we now get to how petrol is affecting food production?
Well, thank you very much. The honest truth is flooding does affect. I think in the past couple of years, we've always had incidents of flooding that have come in to be able to affect in terms of production of rural farmers, rice, maize, and the rest. But to be honest with you, this is a devastating moment for the state of Maiduguri and possibly other communities downriver. The honest truth is this time of the year is very close to harvest period, and this flooding will just come and really devastate harvest in a very major way. So I think the authorities have to really look closely to be able to further mitigate the food insecurity we've been having in the nation. In the coming months, I think that is when we'll see the full effects of the dam breaking and the flooding that has happened in Maiduguri of recent times.
Oh dear.
But Nigerians are in very trying times at the moment. A lot of loss of lives, property, and livelihood has happened. And I think the government really needs to be proactive in the coming days, weeks, and months to secure life, property, and livelihoods of people.
It's just like making an already bad situation worse. But let's speak to the recent impact of petrol price hike on food production. You have been commended for some innovation you brought into farming, dairy production, and the rest. But that was before the price of petrol was at 900 naira. Now that the price has been increased, we were challenged before. I shall say that. This was a challenge for us before. The question now is, innovation has to triple, has to quadruple. But speak to us first about how this is impacting food production directly, from the farm to the table, now that energy costs are through the roof, literally.
So what you need to understand very quickly is that, you see, over the last couple of years, Nigeria really has grappled with some of these issues, but not at this kind of accelerating rate. For us in Sebore Farms, located in Adamawa State, we've been into the dairy business. And as at the time we started to really go into dairy and backwardly integrating about 18,000 farmers into the formalized dairy value chain, we saw some of these challenges in terms of energy access, which is access to electricity, access to clean fuels for transportation logistics, and access to energy for cooking. This is what energy access means. And what we did on our own side is that we invested in renewable energy to be able to give our factory constant electricity, while also creating a decentralized network of collection centers, milk collection centers, that would allow for us to be able to collect milk from local farmers in rural areas, giving them energy access for cooling of milk and further aggregation. But we commissioned our factory 3 years ago, and we had some very, how would I say it? We had some indices that had not changed. When we started our factory, diesel was 250. Right now in Adamawa is pushing 1,600. Petrol was less than that, and now in Adamawa is about 1,200. So we see people in Lagos and other urban climes complain about 850, 950 in some areas, but we need to understand that the metropolitan areas even have their fuel prices much less than in rural areas because of the extra cost of logistics. I think Nigeria really needs to understand that when you look at national security, one of the dimensions of national security is economic security, food security, energy security, before you start looking at other parts that may affect you, such as physical security, cybersecurity, and the rest. The three components, which are your economic security, food security, as well as your energy security, are critical components because this is what affects the lives of people directly. And for us right now, Esebore, and every small business that I know in and around the country, everyone is grappling with the effects of energy increase that has happened within a very short period of time. Most people need to really understand that when you're actually producing food for a nation, one of the critical cost elements is energy. Energy in terms of electricity for the processing, but you're also thinking about fuel that would help in terms of tractors being powered, delivery trucks, cooling systems for preservation, and even just the logistics of goods and services moving around the country. The critical component of any kind of food security is energy security. And I think over the last years, with the removal of subsidy of the administration, which was extremely necessary and critical, but repurposing subsidied money is important because now we are faced with a very dire situation. And what I mean by this is, in economics terms, we've entered a very detrimental cycle. A detrimental cycle that I will explain is that what you realize right now is with the cost of energy going up, what you're going to see is that cost of goods will go up, which is your primary cost inflation going up. That leads to increase in price. Increase in prices leads to lower profit margin. Lower profit margins lead to a lower demand. Lower demand closes businesses. Closed businesses reduces output and GDP for a nation, which ultimately will lead to further devaluation of our currency in the international scale. And that, what we've realized now is that the reduction in currency is what is also driving our import of the fuels that we require to actually power the nation, and the cycle will continue. I think Nigeria as a nation really needs to sit down right now and really try and break this loop. We try to do it on our own side by investing in renewable energy in Adamawa State, up to the tune of 5 megawatts of power. Adamawa State as a state only collects 7 megawatts from the grid. But you need to realize also that as we're moving forward like this, not only is fuel pricing increasing, but the administration also increased the tariff on energy. And we need to understand that as a nation, we need to know where we want to go. Are you trying to create jobs? Are you trying to stabilize the nation and increase prosperity of the country? Because as we continue thinking this way, there are critical things that need to be invested today so that we can achieve succor tomorrow. Small businesses are reeling. I think in and around the country, nobody will tell you that businesses have not closed. Man has said it. Almost 18,000 businesses closed last year. And we are not seeing or feeling the effects of a reduced impact on our business activities. The macro situation of the country has to be stabilized so that the micro, small, and medium businesses can thrive. With the kind of volatility now in our forex, in our inflation, in our energy prices and cost prices, I think every Nigerian business that is still open right now.
If you can hear me,
giving kudos.
Well articulated, I must say, and I'm happy that you're not just anyone, you are a businessman. And so you're giving us blow by blow as to what is going on, practically using your business. If I heard you correctly, it feels like you said, look, the only way I've been able to manage this is I was ahead of the curve by investing in renewable energy, but every other cost component is worrisome. So in your view, Is the government too much in a hurry with too many policies all at the same time? And this is why we are where we are?
Yes, frankly, I think we are rolling policies out faster than we're able to educate businesses, organized business, international organizations, as well as our people to be able to follow it into. I know we've been rid with this immediate effect kind of policy making over the last decades. We grew up with it. With immediate effect, you're out. With the immediate effect, we're increasing price. Businesses need time to adjust. Businesses need time to plan, allocate resources to be able to buttress this kind of shocks. In pure terms, these are called economic shocks, and economic shocks has to be planned for a nation to kind of understand exactly where it needs to go to, where businesses can plan adequately on where they need to go to. These shocks are very critical, and I'm telling you that the people don't realize that energy, in terms of fuel, are indicative in every single sector of the economy. Like I said, from the production of input into tractors, input into vehicles, small parents taking their children to school. The moment you affect energy, and I think this is maybe what informed our leaders when we had the Petroleum Equalization Fund to be able to smoothen out cost of energy across the nation. Whole-scale changes, the way we're doing it right now, are detrimental to our economy. And we really need to be taking pause in order to kind of reflect on what these impacts will look like. If some of these changes were made and said, okay, by December or January next year, these are going to be the incremental increases in terms of pricing, then people can really sit down and plan and price these things into good and change their strategies. But them happening overnight are things that are more damaging to the economy than most people realize. I know Nigeria's budgetary situation is not in good shape, but the moment you are able to project over a period of time, then people adjust and can allocate resources accordingly, manage their workforce, adjust the labor components, then we can now plan for it. But the way things are happening right now, too many things are changing. I have other colleagues in Kano and Co that have had to shut down their business because their electricity tariffs moved from 6 million naira this month to 42 million naira the next month. And it has wiped away all the profit for the year. These kinds of things are unfair because we know Nigerians are resilient. We know Nigerians are hardworking. We know Nigerians are enterprising. But there's only so much, really, that small businesses that don't have a buffer can actually accept. And the moment businesses close, you need to realize that families are now displaced, families are left vulnerable. We know we have vulnerable populations all across the country, but we know also with these kinds of tariff hikes, you're only decimating the middle class. You're moving everybody that was in the middle class to low income status. And I think every demographic of Nigeria right now, including government, are actually reeling from this kind of immediate policy changes.
Away from policy temporarily now to what may seem to be the environmental impact on agricultural production. And I'm going to explain why I'm asking this part of the question. A few months ago, when the price of tomato and other vegetables shot the rooftop, it was attributed to Pests, tuta absoluta, I believe. But we've seen increased production and the price of tomato coming down now and other vegetables. I want you to talk to us about what is responsible for this increase in supply and the moderation in price a few months after we experienced, that scarcity of the vegetable. Perhaps because some people would say that because of insecurity in the north, there's more of activity rather than productivity going on in terms of agriculture in Nigeria's north. And what can be done to reduce the impact of pests on agricultural production, whether it's being done in the north or in the south?
Well, thank you so much for this question. I what people need to realize, up north is a very agrarian state and is held by rural farmers. The honest truth is, every year we experience this cyclical cycle of farmers going in, producing tomatoes. There's an increase in supply of the food product, and as the price drops. Then towards the dry season, you realize that the production stops, so the prices go back up. This is a cyclical cycle. In every country, what you're actually trying to achieve is a smoothing of that cycle. You actually want a situation whereby you're either producing all year round or you're able to store your excess during the harvest period that can also mitigate you throughout. We know pests, the Ministry of Agriculture has done quite well in terms of its outreach to be able to reduce the or provide pesticides to control, how do I put it, the effects of the tomato. But a very critical point that we need to realize here is that when people say insecurity, look, I operate in Adamawa State, Taraba, and lower parts of Borno, Chibok, and some other places. Most of these farmers are still producing. For me, personally, I attribute insecurity to be about 20% of the problem affecting Nigerian agriculture, while 30% is access to input, access to finance. You also have access to energy in terms of tractors that will enable you to produce a mass scale, and access to sale and distribution. So I'm not a big believer that insecurity is what actually causes our food crisis year on year, because I am operating in the Northeast. I see what our farmers are doing. I see their dedication, resilience, and their need that they want to actually provide economic sustenance or their own economic contribution to the nation. But really and truly, we need to start de-risking our farmers. Our farmers are bearing too much. No other part of the world would you allow your farmers to be taking this kind of load without insurance. What the country needs to do is start to look and pivot inwards to invest in things that reduce the cost of production within the country. That's the only way we are going to be productive. So if you're going to be removing subsidy, you need to be investing in infrastructure that allows for the cost of production to drop. In terms of the energy, you need to be thinking about renewable energy in rural areas or comparative advantages within the geopolitical zone. So whether it be coal, natural gas, biofuels, wind, solar, hydro, we need to be looking at an energy mix that drops the cost of production across the nation down. And we also need to be providing programs that allow our farmers have access to inputs, which is fertilizer, improved seeds, training and education. Things like that are the things that are going to help Nigeria long term. Previous administrations have tried to do this with the Aquabora program, with the program with NISAL, BOI. Everybody has tried it, but I know Nigeria now is in a physical, difficult position. But abandoning those things will only lead to further inflation, which now decimates the income of all Nigerians. I think the administration and everybody needs to be bold in terms of their visioning on what Nigeria needs to achieve.
And, there's a lot that the government needs to do in terms of creativity, right? These are very tricky times and everyone needs to have their thinking caps on. We can't keep doing the same things and expect a different result. That's madness, really. But I want us to speak to the outlook now. The sector which you operate in is said to be a sector that has multiple, value chains, and you have tried to maybe explore some of them. The food business is still meant to be one of the most profitable businesses in the world because that is at the heart of people's needs. When you look at the hierarchy of needs, food survival is basic, so everybody eats. But not everybody might ride in a luxury vehicle or even use a vehicle, but you need to put food in your stomach. So it's meant to be very profitable. So maybe we can also open up the conversation around value chains, look at where we can pay attention to, where we have low-hanging fruits, how government can now say, okay, this area, let's see if we can provide some intervention specifically to this value chain that can then, have a ripple effect across board. So I want you to bring to bear that creative thinking so we can trigger the change that we want to see?
So to be honest with you, like I said, and I always say it, Nigeria is actually blessed with abundance. And I think it's that abundance that doesn't allow us to specialize in things that can actually grow the economy. When a country's currency is being devalued, what you actually need to understand that the things that are being devalued are your labor, your landing costs, and some other things. And that gives you a very significant comparative advantage in terms of agriculture. Agriculture are things that you would put within your land, grow on your land, and be able to create value. And this can affect a majority of your nation without actually too much of investment in education and some other things. So if you look at the country as a whole, well, you need to understand that agriculture is basically divided into livestock and is divided into cash crops. This is at the most basic of categories, but for the international community and in terms of foreign exchange, which Nigeria currently desperately needs, you also need to look at further categorizations. You have tree crops that you can invest in, which is the cocos, the palm, shea butter, baobab, moringa. These are all tree crops that have extreme export potential, and these are scattered all across the geopolitical zones. In terms of fruits and vegetables, pineapples, bananas, strawberries, apples, mangoes, avocado, these things, again, are things that only grow within the equator side of the world. And Nigeria is sitting right on the equator. So we know that we also have the potential to be able to invest heavily in this and actually get it out. Then if you go into other things, such as our cash crops, which are the maize, sesame, groundnut, Nigeria is blessed. And I think what we really need to do is that we really need to sit down and think that every state needs to specialize in what they are known for, what their climate can achieve, and what the people are already known for and know how to do. These kinds of investment, Nigeria is blessed. And sometimes it confuses people of my generation why we're not able to leverage this. I mean, we can leapfrog technologies. There are things that our forefathers did and found prosperous that we are no longer doing or even putting it in context. For us, especially in terms of a policy perspective, what you need to realize is that we need to focus more on food crops, but also on the cash crops. When somebody invests in ginger, you cannot buy ginger. You have to actually sell ginger to actually make an income. When you do palm, you do not lick palm. You actually have to sell palm. These things are a way for us to focus the Nigerian mentality that food crops are important, yes. But food crops, when you invest in food crops directly, local farmers can also keep it for personal consumption. But if you invest in cash crops, you must actually sell it for you to be able to gain income from it. And if you're able to produce it and put it to an international standard, then you can export it. Livestock is something, again, that I am very passionate about. Livestock, because livestock is prevalent in every part. Livestock, you're thinking about the cows, goats, sheep, pigs, poultry. These 5 categories are things that Nigerians can actually produce in, and they also have so many effects in terms of value addition that can be important to be able to unlock value for the Nigerians. So I always say a cow's value as a whole in pieces actually more valuable than the cow. When you're thinking about the milk that can come out of it and the cash flow that can be generated from milk, the meat, if cut properly, what that value will look like. The blood is used for pharmaceuticals, is used for blood meal. The bones as well, you can use the skin for leather products. When you actually look at livestock, which Nigeria has in abundance, you can also create tremendous value. For me, it shocks me that Nigeria is in this kind of situation, and the people that are at the helm right now are not looking at diversifying into agriculture in such a major way that can actually affect the lives of everybody. Look, when you hear me talking like this, I'm only expressing the frustrations of people within our generation, that we are seeing our future, because inflation actually eats up the future. Debt actually is future income spent now. Our debt profile as a nation is increasing. Inflation is on the rise. Youth unemployment is on the rise. And I think agriculture is one of the major sectors that it's not, it doesn't go without saying that agriculture is the way for us to be able to unlock value across the country.
All right, Mr. Aminu, as we begin to wind down, I know that there's been that conversation. In fact, a committee has been set up for Ministry of Livestock Development to be drawn out of the Ministry of Agriculture. We'll see how that eventually affects, and maybe inputs like yours will be considered so that we can really, really do the best we can to make the most and begin to diversify, not just talk about diversification, really do diversification, focusing a lot more on agriculture as it should. But I want to drill down on something you mentioned in passing. The model and the argument has always been that we've been living, they call it fake life, because they're subsidizing electricity, subsidizing PMS before it was removed. So subsidizing consumption was a problem. In your proposal, which you mentioned in passing, is about subsidizing production. Focusing on the space where you are, how best can it be done and how effective can it be done so that we get the kind of output we should get? Because at the end of the day, we're looking at the cost element being brought down, which will trickle down to how much we buy it per unit cost of anything we want to buy.
Okay, thank you for taking out that nuance. You know, when you subsidize in an economic sense, you don't subsidize the consumption. So you don't subsidize the final product. You actually subsidize inputs going into producing the final product. But in a situation like Nigeria and in my sector, what you need to be doing is most of the plant, machine, and equipment that is required for you to be able to unlock value in agriculture currently are going to be imported in. Most small businesses, medium businesses right now cannot afford the price of foreign exchange for you to actually do that importation. So what you actually need to do is that the money that was allocated towards subsidy needs to be allocated towards reducing the cost element for producers. What I mean by this in a simple sense right now, I'm in the dairy sector. Ever since the devaluation, we've not been able to procure any new kind of collection infrastructure, because we get this collection infrastructure, which is the milk equipment, the solar components, the battery components, into the country, because my cost for doing this kind of importation of plant and machinery increased fivefold over the space of a very short period of time. And we're unable to plan for that kind of expansion. What government needs to do, like I said, is because we're in a state of limited resources, the two components that you need to kind of reallocate your money into is getting plant equipment and machinery into the country so that it comes in at a rate that Nigerians earning in Naira can actually afford. Additionally, we need to be looking at how we get energy all across the nation in the cheapest manner. What we mean by this is, if you're going to go back and start revamping pipelines that were initially built in the 70s that were able to move oil to depots in Niger State, in Adamawa State, and other places, so that marketers can get these petroleum products cheaper across. Moving energy products with trailers and trucks is only adding the cost of diesel that will move the trucks all the way up north. When you're here in places in Sokoto earning, having a fuel price of over 1,800, how do you expect any kind of agro produce or any kind of small business in Sokoto to actually survive? These are some of the things that we really need to look at. We need to be reallocating the subsidy savings into components that actually reduce the cost of production for Nigerians earning in Naira. This is how you unlock value. If not, every small business would actually have to go and source money, and they're only going to do transfer pricing to the final consumer. What we need to do is subsidize investment in infrastructure that reduce the cost of production for the country. If you start doing that, it may not happen immediately, but in 18 months, you start to see the effects of these kinds of investment. Right now, investing in subsidizing, either it be rice or buying up farmers for our grain reserves, these things don't do anything, because after you buy that, you're only going to increase money supply within the country, which also causes cost push inflation. Fundamentally,
as
over
far
the
back
last
as
1
yesterday.
year, our
Right. Pardon me.
fundamentally
Clearly,
over
from
the
what you've
last 1
said,
year,
time is of the essence, and work needs to start as soon as yesterday. But we have to thank you so much. I think this has been a very interesting expose into your sector, the value chains, and what government needs to do. Aminu Murtala Yako, agripreneur, dairy farmer, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for representing our generation, at least in the agriculture sector. Hopefully, other young people will join you in this one. Thank you for your time again.
I pray they come. Thank you so much.